Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas. My guest today is Stan Hess. Hello, Stan. How are you?
Hey, Clayton. And how is everybody in Texas land? That's where I grew up. I left Texas in 1971. And I got a lot of friends and family down there. So thank God that you're broadcasting from there now, because I have some fond memories when I was growing up back in Texas.
I don't have that many fond memories of Texas. While I was growing up, it was pretty nice. I've been in exile for about 40 years and finally came home. Back to, back to Travis County.
Well, as I remember in Texas, Austin and places like Kerrville and Fredericksburg and those places are really nice.
Beautiful area, beautiful yeah. Hill country in Texas. And
it's where the German immigrants came to become farmers.
That's right. That's right. I'm surprised they didn't round all of our ancestors up, my grandfathers, and put them in concentration camps for being German, you know.
Well, you know, Clayton. There was a program on PBS. Oh, it was probably 10 years ago, and it was about Germans in the United States, and it was talking about how the Germans, when they came to the United States, got along pretty well with American Indians, because you have to remember that the Germans, just like every new immigrant, whether they're white or whatever, they get hazed. They're not like the rest of the people that have been there for a while. So since the Germans didn't have a lot of friends, the Germans got together with the American Indians and worked out a peace treaty. So, you know as well as I do how history is slanted, but history is much more interesting that the what I refer to as the Manhattan Borough networks dish out to us.
Now that ought to be right in line. Talking about the Indians, first of all, the state is named after the Indians, Tejas.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been accused so often, by these trolls, by these Jewish assholes out there that want to demonize anybody they can't control or can't dominate. And they try to say I'm a racist. I mean, probably a week after I had a black man on from the Tea Parties, I had him on my show. He was a pretty good guest. He was a great guy. And, then suddenly I appeared on the NAACP website as a bigot, a racist. And this black man wouldn't come back on to my show.
Right. Well, that's how they divide us.
Divide and conquer. That's
right.
the oldest message in warfare.
You bring up that name Tea Party. I think what we've been having since 1900 in this country is not a tea party, but a bagel party.
Now, tread easy here. I mean, I try to find the good in everyone. And the Jews gave us lox and bagels, man. I mean, I really like lox and bagels.
Well, I don't. I used to eat that stuff. I like lox, but I don't like bagels.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. I'm sorry. I have to share this with you. I have to share it. I told you I was going to do this, so I gave you a heads up. I just have to tell you folks about this. A plane left Heathrow Airport under the control of a Jewish captain, and his co-pilot is Chinese. It's the first time they've flown together, and an awkward silence between the two there seems to indicate a mutual dislike. Once they reach cruising altitude, the Jewish captain activates the autopilot, leans back in his seat, and mutters, "I like Chinese." "No like Chinese?" asked the co-pilot. "Why not?" "You people bombed Pearl Harbor, that's why." No, the co-pilot protests. "Chinese not bomb Pearl Harbor. That's Japanese, not Chinese." "Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, doesn't matter, you're all alike." There's a few minutes of silence, and the co-pilot suddenly announces, "I know like Jews." "Yeah? Why not?" asks the captain. "Jews sink the Titanic," says the co-pilot. "What? You're insane. Jews didn't sink the Titanic," exclaims the captain. "It was an iceberg." "Iceberg, Goldberg, Greenberg, Rosenberg, no matter, all the same."
Well, since you brought that up, I'll tell you a story that you will never have known if it didn't come from a person like myself who went from, I was pretty kosher for most of my early life. When I was I guess I was around 20, something like that. I was a big supporter of Barry Goldwater, and then what happened is I dropped out of school, and they were about ready to send me to Vietnam, and luckily I had a physical deferment, so I didn't have to go. But I got involved in the anti-war movement, and guess which group I joined up with? The Trotskyists. So I've been kosher for a long time, brothers and sisters. But then what happened, I got shot in the face and called a white boy. And in fact, had a shotgun put to my back in 1971, delivering magazines for Harris County News Company in Houston. So this stuff about ethnic tension, I mean, I understand it just like Clayton does. But I got a story, two stories about Chinese in the San Francisco Bay Area. This buddy of mine, who I was a member of the Young Socialist Alliance with, who was the Young Socialist Alliance was the youth group of the Fourth International. Trotsky and some others, dissidents from Stalin, had started this Fourth International, and anyway, in San Francisco, there was a huge amount of interracial crime. And this friend of mine told me, because he was a bus driver like I was in San Francisco, and he paid attention to what was going on the street, that unbeknownst to the normal person in San Francisco, there had been a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan in the Sunset. No, it was the Richmond district of San Francisco. And so all of a sudden, these local Chinese who'd started moving out to the Richmond district, or was Sunset district, it's out by the beach in San Francisco, they came as a small group to attend. They wanted to go to the Klan meeting. And the Klan guys said, "No, this is just for white people." But I thought to myself, that is so Tom Wolfish, Tom Wolfe, the writer, to see radical chic turned upside down. I'll tell you about another story, and this is something that happened right down the block from where I lived in Berkeley. I used to live at the Berkeley Inn in Berkeley, California, and it was right on the corner of Haste and Telegraph Avenue, right across from People's Park. Anyway, there was a Chinese stir-fry place. It was actually, they served American food and Chinese food. It's one of those steam plate places, and right on Telegraph. Anyway, this guy I know, he was a Stalinist, and he was in there one day, and the Chinese cooks went into the kitchen in order to bring out some more steam tray food. Well, anyway, this black guy noticed they weren't there, so behind the steam tray counter. So he went back there and filled his coffee up, his coffee cup up with coffee. And as he was coming away from behind the counter, the Chinese cooks came out with cleavers and said, "No nigga." So here we have again racial animosities from the mouth of Chinese. And for those people that don't believe that there is interracial tension among other ethnic groups and African Americans or Africans, all you have to do is keep an eye open. Over in China, in I believe it was in the 70s, I still have this news clipping. There, the Chinese communists at that time had a part of the government had invited over Chinese diplomats and students. Well, guess what the Africans were doing? They were hustling these Chinese young girls, and there was some crime involved where blacks were committing crimes on the streets of Beijing. And there was this picture, this AP picture of a group of Chinese surrounding this black guy and pounding him for disrespecting a Chinese woman. So again, this ethnic tension that is out there, which nobody wants to talk about in terms of how it affects other ethnic groups, it goes on between all different ethnic groups. In fact, Clayton, I told you before when you contacted me before the show that I told you I was going to just mention this book called Mugged, M-U-G-G-E-D, Racial Demagoguery from the 70s to Obama by Ann Coulter. Now, even though Ann Coulter is a Zionist, Ann Coulter is pretty feisty, and even though this book was published by a Zionist named Zakheim, and that name is kind of got my eyebrows twitching because there's a guy named Dov Zakheim, D-O-V Zakheim, who was one of the preeminent neocons under George W. Bush during the 9/11 time.
By the way, he's the one that stole or lost $2.3 trillion from the Pentagon when he was and that was announced that they couldn't account for $2.3 trillion the day before 9/11. He was the comptroller. He was the comptroller for the Pentagon. He was totally responsible here. And by the way, he's working on Mitt Romney's campaign now.
Well, what else? Mitt Romney is nothing but a right-wing Zionist, and Obama is a left-wing Zionist. So, as I like to say, folks, Zionism to the left, Zionism to the right, stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight. Hook 'em horns! Hook 'em horns! Get your horns up, folks!
No, I'm sorry. The Jews have a trademark on the hook 'em horns thing. They want you to believe that's satanic, not Austin football. You know. Now.
Well, yeah. I just wanted to throw something out. I was married to a Jewish woman who I'm still friends with, who is an anti-Zionist, and I also some of the things that Israel Shamir sends out, and also that Gilad Osman sent out. This is righteous stuff. I like to refer to them as righteous Jewish people. If we had more Jewish people that stood up to their own people, to their own elites, we would have a much better world. But there's some courageous Jewish people out there, just like there's some courageous white folks. And by the way, folks, I've coined this word. Jewish people talk about world Jewry. I refer to this term world Ury, E-U-R-Y. and that you're mean to us, you're committing anti-Euritism, and you're an anti-Eurite. Somebody asked me one time, what is a European American, or what is Euri, world Euri? And I said, well, we're the people referred to as Goy, Gringo, Honky, White Boy, and Chicxa. So again, I like to do this just like Jewish stand-up comedians do. There was a guy named Lenny Bruce, and that wasn't his real name. But he was talking about Jewish people and their relations to others, and he said, he says, I can imagine those kings and queens where the Jewish comedian was in the court of this European royalty, and after a few drinks, after a few sips of wine from the goblets that they were drinking from, these European royalty people, they looked over at the Jewish guy doing stand-up comedy, and they said, you know what? These Jewish guys have got good BS. So my point is, to a lot of people, is make this into a humorous thing, because that's what they've been doing to us in Hollywood and in Manhattan for a long time, which is tell us a joke that has a racial barb in it, and then when we get upset, they'll say, oh, get over it, you're too uptight. Well, again, we can play that game too. And the other thing is when they bring up the big H of the Holocaust, I like to bring up, well, what about the Holodomor, the extermination of Soviet white Christians by the Bolshevik kosher class that ran the Soviet Union?
60.
The people that financed it, like Jacob Schiff and other Jewish financiers, and the toadies like Woodrow Wilson, who was all koshered up by his so-called park bench advisors.
House.
Anyway,
House.
I just let's look at this in perspective, and go ahead, Clayton. That was my rant.
No, that's I was doing a biker magazine. I had just found out that the CIA was bringing all the cocaine into the country under Operation Watchtower. And we had all the Bush was the CIA director at the time. He was behind it all. He was covering for the Mossad. Mossad and CIA were working together. Same intelligence agency, possibly. Just like Homeland Security is controlled by the Mossad, controlled by dual citizens. But before I got into any of this, I was at a party in a penthouse in Miami Beach, and I went up there, and this big black football player, almost my size, came up and looked me in the eye and said, "So, how do you feel about us black folks?" And I looked at him for a minute and reached out and slapped him on the arm, and I said, "Well, I got to be straight with you, brother. I don't like niggers, white or black." And
there you go.
When he picked his jaw up off of the floor, he said, "Well, you might be all right." And I said, "Yeah, you might be all right too. Just don't get in my face again."
There you go.
And no, that's it. I've said over and over again, well, Clay, it's not all Jews. It's not all Jews. All Jews are Zionists. No, they're not. But I don't care whether you're Jewish or you're a Christian or you're a Muslim. If you keep your mouth shut when somebody is trying to dominate somebody else or force their religion on someone else, then I've got a problem with you.
Yeah.
And I don't believe the little grandmother over there that's produced a couple of lawyers or doctors, I don't think she is evil. Now, we can go back, and I will be talking about, on the show, I'll be talking about the true Israelites, which I believe are you and me. We crossed the Caucasus Mountains. Your ancestors and my ancestors walked across the Caucasus Mountains, settled Germany, settled Sweden, settled England, and became called Caucasians because of where we came from. I don't have any problem with doing that, but the Christian identity that has been infiltrated by these Zionists, by these Jews, and may have gone all the way back into the Bible days of the before history, and how do you know who Yahweh was? Was he was he really God, or was he a pretender using? And have they been using the Christian religion to dominate? Are they? How long has it been going on? How long have I have a problem thinking of a just God telling Abraham to murder his son. That doesn't sound very Christian to me.
Well, the beat goes on, but all we can do as truth seekers is continue to get out information that the Manhattan Borough networks won't give you. And that's why you're involved in this. That's why I'm involved in this. And, we met up at that Randy Weaver conference in Nevada. Carl Klein was there. There was a bunch of people there that spoke. And, folks, that's how we get together is fortuitously we meet in these conferences, and there's not as many of these anymore. But at the same time, we're on the radio, and we're here to get information to you. And Clayton, I tell people all the time, they say, well, how do you get your material? I say, well, you send it to me. We're all correspondents to each other. We're all part of the great diaspora of World Yuri, and we are very diverse. But when it comes to us being attacked, we're going to rally with each other. We're going to put all our linguistic differences and slight differences in the way we look, and we're going to come together in the future and say, hey, we've had enough. As the Latinos say, basta, basta ya. We've had it.
We do need to work together. I mean, it's pretty simple, folks. I mean, it really is pretty simple. If you are trying to take care of your family, if you're trying to take care of your town, if you're trying to take care of your county, if you're standing up for your rights, and the Bill of Rights don't have any color in it. And I tell people probably on a daily basis here, the Constitution protects you, so you can worship any way you want. You want to hug a tree, I'll loan you my tweezers to pick the splinters out. You wanna bang your head against that Wailing Wall, knock yourself out, I'll watch. You wanna get down on your hands and knees, stick your ass up in the air and your nose in the dirt, I'll try to keep the St. Bernard off of you. You wanna get on your knees and pray for a Cadillac, I'll try to put a good word in with God so he don't drop it on top of your ass. That's the Constitution. That's the Bill of Rights, not even a Constitution. We can argue about that forever. But, the Constitution was there to put change on the government, and they've made that a joke. But, your religion, however you want to practice your religion, practice it. Don't try to force it on me.
Yeah, but you know what the biggest religion in the world is political correctness, and that, as a friend of mine says, that's Judaism for Gentiles.
Well, that's what the Russians, that's what people like Alexander Solzhenitsyn called communism, said it was Judaism for the masses. Folks, all you got to do, really, read the Talmud, read the protocols of the elders of Zion, and see whose plan has been around for 2,000 years, and they're after any Christians because Jesus was the first Christian. It's and they've been after Christians ever since. They killed 60 million white Russian Christians in the Soviet Union when they created the Soviet Union. And the Bolsheviks, this was a Jewish operation from start to finish.
Exactly. I wanted to mention something because I always enjoy coming on the show because you've been around the block just like I have. I just had my 68th birthday on September the 11th.
Nice to have somebody older than me here. Nice to have somebody older than me.
I want to urge people to buy this book called Mugged by Ann Coulter because Ann Coulter brings out racial hoaxes in her book. She brings out the lies of so-called black victims. She brings out the horribleness of what I refer to as zebra killings, zebra attacks, wildings, whatever you want to call them, that these flash mobs of blacks that racially profile white folks and beat them up at state fairs and whatever. But what Ann Coulter says is we need to get beyond race. Wait a minute, Ann Coulter. We've got a different world now. What we have now is, because of the kosher media and the kosher academics, and many of these liberation groups were founded by the Ford Foundation, which was in the 80s and 90s run by Susan Beresford, and she's a Jewish woman, and the woman who was the chief executive officer was a Jewish woman, and they funded something like $13 million or $30 million, I don't know what it was, Clayton, a year in grants to set up liberation textbooks, to fund the writing of textbooks, to fund chairs in feminist studies, black studies, La Raza studies, on and on and on and on. So when Ann Coulter, who's writing a book that's published by a guy named Adrian Zackheim, I don't know if that's Dov Zackheim's brother or cousin or whatever, but when she says we need to get beyond race and that the only people that have civil rights are black folks, or group rights, I beg to differ. I am the author of European American Heritage Month, which is celebrated in approximately 6 school districts in the San Francisco Bay Area. In fact, this is the last day of European American Heritage Month, okay? So we need white student unions, in my point of view. Whatever every other group has, we need. We need a white caucus in Congress. We need a white caucus in every state legislature. We need white studies run by white folks that tells our story, that tells our narrative. No, Ann Coulter, we don't need to get beyond race. We need to organize like every other ethnic group for basic human rights. That is when white folks start getting the message. And we know